This is The Art of Startup War, and I am your sensei, Brian McMahon. Now, in Season 1 and 2, I got inside the minds of startup investors. In Season 3, I brought in entrepreneurs to share their startup journey. Here, in Season 4, we combine both so you can hear investors critique the investment value proposition of individual companies. You're going to hear how investors make decisions to invest in startups, what makes a great entrepreneur, and how billion-dollar companies are built. So tune in every Tuesday, 10 a.m. on all the major platforms. You can empower your tribe by sharing the podcast, and remember to subscribe, rate, review, and leave us a comment. Good morning, it's 10 o'clock, it's Tuesday morning. Brian McMahon here from Expert Dojo. Again, a phenomenal entrepreneur. Again, we are going to look at the journey of the entrepreneur hero, which is taking a brand new business which has never existed before and taking it to almost impossible heights because it's all done from nothing. Hany, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian.
And we know each other. We go back a long time. I've been interested in your company for a very long period because the area that you're disrupting is a fascinating area. And it's not fascinating because it's not ripe for destruction or disruption. Because education is, right? That's the area you're disrupting. It's fascinating because maybe for the very first time, the massive friction of disrupting that space is disappearing a little bit and coming up with something that you're doing, which is incredibly ambitious, is possible.
Yeah, I agree.
I've left it very cryptic, right? I haven't quite brought us in there. So we're going to talk about the future of education, and we're going to talk about how you're bringing that to the market. But I want to rewind back, if I possibly can, way before Athleta-Ed to when it all began. What possessed you to start off a business, and what gave you this particular idea to do it?
So my background has been in education from an investor perspective. I was in Dubai for 8 years. The Middle East and Asia are the largest private education markets in the world. And so I didn't know that. The largest by number of people who use them, or largest by because in the U.S. in the K through 12 space, you don't have large school groups. You know, the best schools are one-off schools, whereas in Asia and in the Middle East, you have the one of the largest school groups I know quite well is a company called GEMS Education. It's based in Dubai, and it's been around for 50 plus years. American, Indian, British curriculum schools for the expat population of the UAE. So in these international markets, you have a need for Western education, and they were served by private companies.
Okay, good. So you came up. So you came from that background. You're deep in education.
Yep.
You arrived back over here in the U.S. And what happened?
Came back to the U.S. Wanted to do cross-border venture. Was looking at doing possibly a venture platform, a venture fund, and the best way to do that is you have a few deals that you're working on, and Athleta-Ed was one of those projects that the idea was to launch build out the business model, build out the team, and then kind of go out and fund it. And
but let's go a little bit slower. So you were going to do the venture fund. You said, hold on, I'm going to get an idea. Like, what was it about Athleta-Ed that is the one?
Well, so my background is that, I did the executive MBA at Columbia. I was fortunate enough to be one of the younger people in that program. When we're looking at developing various education projects, one of them was an executive MBA. We wanted to have very specific MBA programs for industry. I'm a guy who loves sports, played a lot of sports growing up, and I wanted to look at potentially creating an executive MBA in sport. I knew that there was an opportunity for, a Goldman banker who wants to get into the sports industry. How do they do that? They have all the requisite skills to do M&A in the sports industry, but they just don't have any access or background in it. Someone like me. At the same time,
and that was amazing to me when we first spoke, that there was no MBA in sports.
Well, so there are, but not at the level of kind of tier one business schools for the most part. And again, that was, so you're asking how the idea came about. Initially, it was to do one in sport from an MBA perspective. Most of them are done through, if you're talking about a master's level, it's done through professional schools, not the MBA school. And so Columbia, where I was, is a good example of that. It's done through the professional studies program, not done through the MBA. They have courses now at Columbia in sport, so that the whole industry of sport is now getting greater attention because there's a lot more capital coming into that space. But when this is 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when I first started thinking about the idea was simply to kind of pair people from industry with someone like Kobe, who, out to 3 weeks after he retires, he launches his fund. LeBron James is an investor, KD's an investor, Iguodala is an investor. There are a lot of athletes that are investors. The ownership structure of teams have changed for the last several years, where the Golden State Warriors are basically a Silicon Valley investor club. It's not just Lacob and Goober, but there's several of the minority partners are very active in venture, separate from KD Durant. Well, he's not a Warrior anymore, but Durant is a very active investor, and same with Curry and Iguodala and others. So there was a lot of activity happening around venture in sport, and I just knew that the opportunity to create a business curriculum with a focus on sport would drive, one, greater learning outcomes, and two, we'd be able to partner with tier one schools because there's a social pressure at the university level in terms of providing real value to the student athlete. So what I mean by that, in college, the two sports that matter are basketball and football, sadly, in terms of revenue generating sports. And of those, of the top 20 programs in both those sports, many of them are at elite academic institutions. So there's a real problem when Duke is now a one-and-done basketball school, right?
Right.
And if you're thinking about a one-and-done basketball player, which is the term that obviously a lot of people in the NCAA don't like, but the point is you're only on campus for like 9 months. So what real relevant education are you getting? Berkeley, where I'm from, there are a lot of faculty members who literally want to shut down the entire athletic department because
it's tremendous.
Because there's a real social inequity there.
Yeah,
right.
The world has changed. Like it was expected. I always remember before reading stats about not just basketball players, just professional athletes, and the high percentage of them that go bankrupt within 5 to 10 years of finishing their career.
Well, so there's also a reason for that. That you hear about all the kind of the salacious stories of athletes, pissing away all their money or whatever. There's a real the reality is that the average playing career is less than 5 years in the four major sports.
Right.
So you outlive that revenue that you generated, and there's really no skills that a lot of the athletes have had the opportunity to develop while they were in college. So going back to my point about the social inequity that exists in sports is that, you're talking about a 5-star world-class athlete who gets to a place like, pick the schools that I'm close to, Berkeley, UCLA, wherever. They're the top athletes in the world. They get to a top athletic program, and they have a very slim chance, and the chance is less than 2% to make it to the pros.
Wow!
And so that's across all the sports. And so then then what do you do at 21 years of age? What we wanted to do was kind of redefine what success is for the student athlete. So my young kids will not be getting into Berkeley with the scores that I had. So why not look at getting into Duke or USC or any of these great schools? Why not look at that as the success? Because it is a $40,000, $50,000 value, and in our view, we're a bunch of Berkeley type folks, so you can imagine where our politics lies on whether athletes should get paid or not.
Yeah. But
the bigger issue is what are we doing for the 98%?
Beautiful.
And so that's kind of where we started with, and what we found out. And to go back to the earlier point, we started with an executive program because it's a great $150,000, $170,000 program. It's easy to fill, we initially thought, but where the real social pressure was and the larger market opportunity was at the collegiate level.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of how we started and kind of shifted focus to the bachelor's.
Anybody listening to this can see the product fit. You have, and I love that it's really interesting. And all the time I've known you, I've never equated the fact that your focus is on the 98% of folks, amateur sports folks who are either not going to make it through to professional, or even if they do make it through, they're going to make it through for too short a period for it to be able to change their lives forever. So you're adding a business aspect to it, whether it's that athlete can become a venture capitalist, whether that athlete becomes an agent, whether that athlete becomes, who knows, maybe a road to an attorney, right?
Working for Twitch in sports.
Yes.
Right. So there's just a huge opportunity for high level athletes to go on to have
You're
careers.
giving them each way bets rather than just betting on the horse on the nose. Which is really phenomenal. So saying this, I love it. And I actually realize that your goals are very aligned with my goals within early stage startup. I'm not really interested in the 1 or the 2% that actually become unicorns because there's a perfectly contrived system to actually help those folks become unicorns. I'm focused on the 98% of people who do not make it through, and how can we increase success, or maybe even, to your point, redefine what success looks like. So amazing, right? We're on exactly the same path. Now, one thing is having that vision, which is a beautiful vision. Another thing is building a curriculum which is worthy of one of the top schools on the planet. How did you do that?
So I was fortunate enough to get my co-founder was my professor at Haas at Berkeley. He was 18 years as associate dean. As academic as a professor as you could possibly be, 40 years as a professor. I knew we had something when I explained to him and I talked to him about online. And you can imagine at a place like Berkeley what they view as online. And I told him, I said, look, when I sat in my 300th person Econ 1 class, how was I in any way advantaged relative to someone taking a class online? And because he is a fair-minded person and a true academic in terms of wanting to see the students succeed, he understood that, whether you're at Berkeley or Michigan, UCLA, the Econ 1 class or Calc 1 or Chem 1, whatever, that's a 200-person class in a national university, right? Even at these great schools. And so, we started with that premise that we can actually create an online program to create greater access. And so, like me, he also was an avid sports fan, but also really sees the value in sports as a great driver of social change. So there's a lot of things underlying of what we feel. I mean, I grew up I came to this country when I was 2, but sports was my first kind of great access into feeling American, playing sports, across all areas of life, gender, religion, race, obviously orientation. Sports has been a great driver of social change. It's been a great platform for a conversation.
It's the great equalizer.
It is.
But how do you build the courses?
The courses are really built around taking existing courses and simply taking out the case studies, problem sets, and adding sports content to it. So it's really simple that we'll teach the accounting and finance course with the Green Bay Packers financials. So when I was doing my MBA, I didn't have a choice to look at Clorox's financials, right?
Gotcha.
And so all we're doing is we're taking existing courses, which again, someone like me who's in the background has a background in education, we're not getting universities to consider creating a whole new course because that's a long process.
So there's no red tape. Everybody's already agreed with the structure of the course. All you're doing is making it specifically relevant to people who are in the sports space.
Right.
And how close are you to having any of these courses finalized?
We launched our pilot last year. We are actually completing right now the first fully asynchronous business course offered by a top 20 ranked business school.
Boom.
With UCLA.
Boom.
and so
fantastic. Well done.
I always tell people it's better to be lucky than smart or good because as I said, we're Berkeley people. 2 years ago when we really started getting deep into this, obviously we spent a lot of time with Haas. Berkeley, the business school was changing out its dean at that time, and the athletic director was outgoing at Berkeley. And so
the timing was right. Although I prefer the Gary Player phrase, which is the more I practice, the luckier I get.
That's true.
So I do believe timing plays a role, but you do need to have that perfect mix of opportunity meets timing, meets luck, meets hard work. And actually, if you've got the hard work, the timing, and the opportunity, sometimes the luck is just thrown in there because you want to have a fourth.
Yeah.
So you had those three there nicely combined, which was really good.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do as far as getting people to sign up for the course and pay for the course?
So with UCLA, only 3 of the 9 UC campuses have an undergraduate business school course. UCLA is not one of them. And what that means is that if you want to take undergraduate business courses other than a handful of courses that are currently offered at UCLA, they'll be offered through us and our partnership with UCLA. And so that's kind of a real opportunity for us is one, obviously targeting the student athlete, But then just the broader market of people who want to understand and take business courses at the undergraduate level. Our courses, because we are focusing on state system schools, anyone in the state of California, the public system, can take that course. So 3 million students in the UC, CSU, and community colleges can take our courses.
Fantastic. And then, so talk to me a little bit about the trajectory over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, how much money are you raising right now?
Yep.
And also, actually, before we talk about this, you speak about this in a very matter-of-fact way, in that it's been relatively easy to get to the stage. What has that journey been like?
It hasn't. It hasn't. But in education, one of the big areas I think that we have is the relationships, and so there's a built-in trust. So with UCLA, the associate dean was a colleague of my co-founder, Ed Haas. So when we went down there, it was kind of met with open arms because the business school was put under has experienced the kind of requirement of the student athlete who's not, you can't take undergraduate business school courses at UCLA. There are very few of them that are offered. And that's true of the top 20 ranked business schools, at least according to U.S. News and World Report, only 11 offer undergraduate business school.
Wow.
So, Harvard doesn't, Stanford doesn't, UCLA doesn't, Chicago and others don't. So there's just what we're trying to solve for is access to a tier 1 business education.
Okay.
And so, like I said, at UCLA, the kind of the reception was there. We'll find out what the challenges are when we try to go to other schools. I always tell people getting the first partnership is really hard. The second one is a little bit
But how
less
much
hard.
can you make from UCLA? I don't say from UCLA, but with your partnership with UCLA, how do you project that out?
So we look at it from the state of California, and we look at UCLA as a partner to access the state of California. So we would want to target 5,000 to 10,000 students in out of that 3 million person kind of plus market. And
when will that happen?
Over the next several years. And so we look at each kind of state academic partnership in terms of 5,000 to 10,000 students. The 10 largest states in the country. Michigan is the 10th largest state in the country, has 10 million person population and above. So if you look at the 10 largest states in the country, and we're targeting California, Texas, Florida, New York first, that accounts for about 27% of the U.S. population. The 10 largest ones count for about 60-some-odd% of the population. That's a good, we feel pretty good about, going in and on a university by university basis, reaching out to those schools.
Plan is a great plan.
Yep.
But so just talk to me about the revenue. I'm trying to break it down by month. Like I'm trying to understand it. We're in July now. This podcast may come out a little bit later, but we're in July right now. So I mean, is it in August? Do we expect to have 5,000? In September, 20,000?
Yes. So in the idea is that we are, at least in our initial years, we'll go with summer. So we're talking about we're launching our course this August. It will be next summer as well for the next batch.
Gotcha.
And so kind of the next year's batch is 2,000 plus students that we're targeting, and that's kind of a ramp up off of what we will have done this year.
Very good. So good revenue coming through, and then you'll add on. So talk to me about.
In terms of your question about the rev share, it's a very typical kind of rev share with academic partners, which is. 2U, which is the largest company, this is exactly what they do, except with the graduate schools. Udacity with Georgia Tech has a similar kind of model. So it's you basically get a rev share as the technology partner to the university.
I got you. So everybody's got a benefit in bringing this thing through. And I suppose I'm trying to understand, when you hit that month of revenue, I mean, what is the revenue we're looking at? Is it 10,000, 100, 500?
So we want to actually the revenue per student on a 4-unit course is about $1,200-$1,300, and you can kind of multiply that up, and we will have somewhere between 20 and 30% rev share. That's kind of at a high level.
Okay, but next August, again, I'm just sticking with it.
Yeah. So
what do you think it's going to look like?
So next August, 2,000 students times
$1,000 was it like 20 million?
Yep. And then that's kind of the target. That's 2 million, right?
2 million actually, yeah.
2 million and some 30% of that.
Yeah, and then how will that then expand out month by month?
So then it would be year by year. For at least for the first few years, in our model, what's unique is that between summer to summer, we get to actually build out the courses. So it's actually operationally quite scalable. So this, for summer 2020, we'll look to have 4 or 5
Gotcha.
courses.
And then how many colleges do you expect to have within the next 3 years?
5 to 10.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so it can be bringing in revenue of multiple millions of dollars a month, which is where we can get to, nice $50 million, $100 million valuations.
Yes.
In the short to medium term.
Yeah, and in terms of edtech, valuations are very high. They've been corrected a bit over the last year or so, but in terms of the one of the most valuable edtech companies, a company called 2U, it's a $2 billion company with some 30,000 plus students, at least last time I checked.
Beautiful. And how much are you raising right now?
We're raising $1 million now, $1 million to $1.5 million now.
On what valuation?
Our last safe was at 14.
Okay. Okay, so you raise $1 million based on 14, and
14 cap. Sorry,
yeah, and then and that's when you talk about a 14 cap, it's on a safe, right?
Yep.
So safe is obviously a debt instrument which doesn't have a valuation on it because it's not equity. But putting a cap in there means that the investors know that the valuation won't go over a certain amount when it gets to the next round. So it's just a nice way of doing it, right? Okay, good. So then talk a little bit about.
And just sorry to add on to that, the follow-on round that what we're hoping to do is kind of Q1 of 2020 when we'll actually be able to have some of the partnerships with sports teams in place in terms of guaranteed enrollment. So that's the big kind of objective. Separate from the universities that we're looking at, we're also looking to partner with industry. So we'll hopefully have a number of teams that say, any of our students who went to any of these schools. And remember, in our saying earlier, that's anyone who went to a San Diego State, a Fresno State, a Berkeley, a UCLA, they could all take our courses for academic credit towards graduation.
Very good.
And so that's when we'll hopefully do our Series A sometime next year, early next year.
Very good. So first one, $1 million that gets you UCLA, gets the integration, gets the site ready, gets the course finished, means you can allocate the staff. Means that you can actually deal with the entire curriculum for those 2,000 people who are going to come through.
Yeah. And
then the next round is going to be to get you to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 more colleges.
That's right.
Seems like a good plan to me.
And hopefully we'll have other significant milestones by that time. Like I said, industry partnerships with teams, and then at the same time, some 1 or 2 hopefully other academic partners as well.
Great. And speak to me a little bit about the team.
Team's a really strong team. Like I said, myself, my co-founder, our education people. Over the last year, I built out a really, really strong group of advisors and angel investors who have deep, deep backgrounds in sport, meaning I think 5 of our advisors have run teams or have been at general management level, C-suite level of teams. One is kind of one of the top transactional attorneys and top 5 transactional attorneys in the country. So we have some deep at ownership level access. And then on the flip side, a lot of kind of athlete access as well.
Okay, excellent. Maybe a little bit about the competition as well.
Yep. So we see ourselves squarely as an edtech company, a very similar model to 2U.
But can anybody else come in and do exactly the same thing that you're doing?
They can. They can in the sense that they could go out and try to identify partnerships. Again, in the edtech landscape, most of the companies have focused on the master's programs because that's where there is a need. There is no real need or kind of pressure at the bachelor's level for a tier 1 school to go online. So, like I said, we've used sports as a unique niche, but this is the first undergraduate business school course offering.
Yeah.
They would just have to have similar kinds of relationships in the industry, and I don't want to say that that's not possible, but it's
unlikely, right? So what you're saying is it's a race to the finish line, and to actually get to the start line, you got to get a ticket to the stadium, and that is not an easy thing to do because if UCLA are happy with the course you're doing, why would they want to risk with somebody else?
So I haven't really worried too much about other edtech companies coming in because I know how hard it is, and so do they. So it's just it's easier to try to go out and just create your own bachelor's, your own nano degree, and try to get an equivalency for that.
And what keeps you up at night?
Just focus on execution. Right now, like I was saying earlier, we're launching the first course, so that's what I'm literally keeping me up at night is going through the editing of that course. We were We had we went through we knocked out all the lectures in studio, so that was really exciting. That a lot of my assumptions went through as far as just the challenge in getting a professor to talk in front of camera. I don't know if you've seen any of these courses. Most of them have not been great, and I feel pretty good about ours.
They're a little bit boring, some of them.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that, and I'm expecting that our first course will be really, really good.
Wow. And then, so looking forward, and you're an investor, what should you expect to your money? I don't want to say what's it going to return at, because that's probably too dangerous a question to ask. But if I'm sitting out there and I got $500,000 and I'm thinking of putting it in, what milestones should I expect to see over the next year, 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a real interesting debate, right? And I've had several of these conversations with a lot of the education-focused VCs that I know quite well. And I've said that, look, there's a niche in sport. One, that once we've established that our ability to kind of partner with industry, we will do that with other industries that are high-demand industries. So you can get a minor in the business of sport. You can get a minor in film. You can get a minor in entertainment. All things that I would have loved to do and other people would have loved to do as a history major at Berkeley.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that in some of my conversations I've had with investors is, you tell me what my valuation is. If I have the same enrollment numbers or the same trajectory of the current market leaders, and obviously we have to prove that out, but if we're able to do that, if I actually have the revenue locked up, right, through kind of partnerships with industry, then why would I not expect a premium? And there's a reason why we're going the safe route, because of that reason. Like, I want to be able to show that when we have 2,000 students, you tell me. Right, like if there's a fair argument against it, fine, but I would, if I was looking on the other end, which I have for a better part of my career, is that I wouldn't see that as a discount. I would see it as a premium, and especially when you've been able to. The biggest challenges in ed tech for most companies is, one is the cost of student acquisition, two is actually getting students to complete their courses, and then three is actually doing that profitably. And so in across these three areas that I've just highlighted, we have actual advantages. So our cost of content creation is lower than other companies, because it doesn't cost me the same amount of money to bring in a world famous kind of executive in sport to come in to want to be part of this. And so I see it in that way. But we'll have to see. But I think for us to find the right kinds of partners who are excited about scaling up, and also the social impact, because of the next step about what we're doing, and again, I think is unique from what we're doing, is once we actually have the hard part covered, which is building out a really preeminent undergraduate business curriculum offering, I can reposition the sports content for lower levels. So you teach physics through the data that we have from industry. I can create scholarships for students who otherwise would never have access to some of these programs. I mean, sports, like a lot of industry, sadly, is a relationship-driven area. So, if you don't have family in the industry, if you don't have access in the industry, it's really hard to get jobs. So, each team has 30-plus interns. Who's getting those internships, right? And so we want to create a program in which we can hopefully someday either feed into those internship programs of the teams, which every person who loves sports would have killed to do, or actually run it for them. And I think that's kind of where we would like to be. And again, I think from that perspective, it's just a very different model in terms of what the current ed tech players are doing. So
brilliant. So we've got the raise clear, we got the valuation clear, we know what's happening with the company. We know where it's going. I really like the fact that you've built this so lean so far. You haven't spent a lot of money on it. You haven't taken any huge amount of money. All you've done is you built up the relationships yourself with the schools, got them to say yes, and then went straight out to build product. Yep. And then went and got the product built, which is fantastic, and de-risks the investors in the future in a really good way. Like I said, for me, this is a thumbs up from Expert Dojo again. I've always been a big fan of you, Hany. We've worked together, for a little while, and for me, how you hit milestone after milestone after milestone to getting yourself into a place where now you've built almost a curriculum for college courses, which is absolutely amazing.
Yep. It's been
hats
fun.
off, mate.
Hard work.
Hats off. And then, so over the next month or two, I imagine the big focus is on fundraising.
Yes.
And just dropping that money and getting that in. So any investors who are interested, definitely speak to you. I would ask, I want to get to, some big tip, a piece of advice that you're going to give to entrepreneurs and your contact details. But I want to, because you naturally go to a very smooth run of the business. And I know no business is smooth and easy and everything else. I just want you to speak a little bit to the early days and maybe some of the challenges, the specific challenges that you faced when you were actually trying to launch this in the first place. And by the way, you can include in there people who really helped you overcome. Mate, we all have them. When I did the dojo, look, there were people here who they could have easily buried me, not that they didn't try. And there were people here who had their hand down and they pulled me out of the soil.
Yep. Well, look, I always, if I ever wrote a book, I would say that a lot of the entrepreneur's experience, I had several early in my career, then I went into and spent a lot more time in finance just because of those early experiences of being paper millionaires and then losing it all kind of thing in some of the early startups I was involved with.
By the way, that's the worst.
It's tough.
Entrepreneurs think
it's tough.
You'll think, it would just be awful to be struggling my whole life and just to be poor all the time. Not quite. The worst
is to have it and lose it.
And you don't. I love your phrase, paper millionaires. I have a very close buddy who would probably not mind me saying this, but I'll leave him unnamed, who tells me about the day he sat in a meeting right in 2000. It was actually in 1999. So you'll know when that was, right? And he was in a boardroom. He had his tech company. He was with the rest of the C-suite. And they called him in and he said, you better not call me in unless it's for a good offer. And they called him in and they offered him $150 million between three of them. And the three of them stood up in indignation and said, how dare you? How dare you bring us down here into this room for this paltry offer that we would never accept? Do not darken our door again. Anyway, fast forward 2 years. There was no company.
So I can one up him on that. I was in a travel technology company in 2001. And the only reason why I had to get a special kind of exception to get into Colombia because I was young for an executive program. And I was going to be in New York, setting up our New York office. This was the first company that ever created an online booking engine for discounted fares.
Wow.
So we had offers for income.
When was this?
This was in 2001. So I was going to be in New York on September 14th. I only applied to Columbia and NYU. I got in both schools, and I was going to go there. And then, I was saying, so that you're asking, the life experiences, these were just things that happened that were completely out of control. 9/11 happened. Company dropped revenue 90% in one day. So when you watch Billionaire, right, that show is I lived that life, and our team lived that life. And so but we were all kids back then, and we didn't know better anyways. But it stung. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I said, well, I like entrepreneurship. Let me kind of move from the other side of the table and try to be supportive. And that was a great experience. And like I said, this was kind of unintended as well. But it's been something I feel really strongly in. But to answer your question, I think, I think there should be just a greater honesty about it. I'm a pretty confident person, so I have no problem saying, look, the challenge is in burning through every last penny that you had that you didn't expect to have. I have kids on the way. I already have kids, and I have more kids on the way. So we're expecting
double down.
Well, that was I'll say
twins,
that twin girls in September. So I don't know how many founders we planned. We thought about having kids. So thankfully we were blessed with that, and then we're blessed twice.
I find it speeds up the exit.
It does.
Just through pure playing, right?
Creates great clarity. That's why I'm here.
No, I love that.
So there's definitely urgency. I think the founder drives the business. So what were the challenges? I would say. Separate from the obviously, which is always the one is the money. Mm-hmm. Is then how do you deal with the rejection? And I have pretty thick skin, so it doesn't really bother me that much if I feel confident in what I'm doing. And it just happens to be a space I know really well. I don't think I'd have the same confidence if I just liked an idea or I was just kind of going into something that I thought. But I mean, I know education, and that's why I knew where we were going to go. And so maybe that's been a good thing in some ways in terms of the relationship side. Maybe it's been a bad thing in terms of like the urgency to go out and raise and things like that. So I would say perhaps, I would have been pushing you a little bit harder last year than I did.
No, I like that. So, okay. I want to get your contact details, and I want everybody to know how they can actually get in touch with the website.
Yep.
Before we do that, though, just share your one piece of important information for entrepreneurs everywhere, based on both sides of the fence, as a venture capitalist and also being a multiple founder of businesses, or a founder of multiple businesses.
I think the best advice, and it comes really from a person with a financial background's perspective, is take more time in developing the model, right? Like while you're developing through that thesis, there's no risk. There's no, I got to go start tomorrow, otherwise someone's going to take my great idea. I don't think we're at that stage with at least a lot of businesses. A lot of it's about execution. So if you spend more time while you're executing, while you actually have a paycheck coming in, while your family's not worried about where the next income is coming from, I think you can spend another 3 months or 6 months. I think a lot of times people make the mistake of like, I got to quit because I hate my job.
Yeah,
and I have all this money in the bank, so I can go do it. And it's only gonna take me 6 months. And I think it's better to go through that a bit earlier and make that exit when you can.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurship. I like that. And then how can people contact you?
Email is the best. I'm very responsive over email. It's Hany, Hany, at Athleta, Atleta-Ed.com.
Perfect. And website is exactly the same.
Yep, it is. And you can see our great team, all the people I've been able to bring on, and all the kind of cool updates are going to be happening over the next few months.
Wonderful. Investors, partners, friends, entrepreneurs, you've been listening to Hany speaking about creating what would have seemed impossible 10 years ago, which is an entire university program, which is unbelievable. Congratulations on everything that you built. Congratulations on where you're going. I'm sure investors will be beating the door down. I'm sure we'll be helping you do that because you get the big thumbs up from Expert Dojo. And we'll be speaking soon. Thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us. If you love the podcast, please empower your circle by sharing these stories. The Art of Startup War is brought to you by Expert Dojo. And remember, we invest in startups, $50,000 checks. Make sure you apply on our site if you are one of those great entrepreneurs looking to bring your company to the next level. As far as the Art of Startup War is concerned, we are back every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. So remember, check out the new episodes. If you want to find out what the investors think, check out season 1 or 2. But make sure you join us every single week.